Morning.
Morning. So let's dive right into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of our virtual career day series. We're here already. My name's Josh Walker. I'm an architect coming to you live from my home, where, like many of you, we're learning and working from home these days. If this is your first episode, it's okay. You don't have to see the previous. This is just our intent to introduce you and high school students around the world to what architects do, and specifically we at HKS, one of the largest architecture firms in the world, and the many kinds of professionals it takes to make it happen. We design everything from stadiums to skyscrapers, hotels to hospitals, and we have over 1,000 people from all professions who get the job done. Architects, accountants, interior designers, engineers, human resources, researchers, and everything in between. There's really a place and a role for everybody, and we've had fun talking about it all. So far we've talked with, and here's the list. Sustainability engineer Mike Brown, Director of Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Giselle Santos Rivera, Architect Deze Kadeh, Interior Designer Adelia Schlois, Researcher Casey Lindberg, Writer Julie Wellick, Design Director Dan Flower, Architectural Photographer Daryl Shields, Special Spanish Language Interview with Architect and Office Director Salvador Rivas, Construction Administrator Ray Stubblefield, Regional Director Angela Lee, Professional Development Manager Adam Boykin. It's been, and I got some of those out of order, but it's been a great run. You can find all of those episodes on our Instagram TV feed or our YouTube channel. This week, we're talking with a professional from our Chicago office, Regional Design Director Jorge Barrero. Jorge, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, I start every video with basically the same question. If you go back to your high school days, what did you think your career would look like?
Well, I think by the time I got to high school, I knew I wanted to be an architect, and that's just because from a very early age, I wanted to become an architect. I was interested in architecture, and oddly enough, I think I became aware of the built environment growing up in Mexico City. When I was young in the 80s, we had a big natural disaster, a large earthquake. And, I became aware, right, of the buildings and what the significance of them were. And that combined with my passion for creativity and drawing, I thought, this is probably something that I could have an impact on. And, I think that's just kind of what clicked it in place when I was like around 4th or 5th grade. And it just stuck with me ever since.
Interesting. And now I'm assuming that as you investigated the field of architecture, you understood that it's not an easy profession. It's a challenging, and there's a lot of intensity to it, being responsible for something so big as the built environment world around us. And that can intimidate a lot of people. What was it that convinced you that it was a good enough fit to pursue despite, the risk of an earthquake knocking your life's work down?
Sure, no kidding, right? No, I think obviously there's a lot of rigor and training, right, that goes into becoming an architect. And I think, the ability to do something for a living that has an impact on people's lives in a positive way outweighs, I think, the risks. And obviously, the schooling,
Yeah.
it trains you well, and your colleagues and mentors teach you along the way how to do things right.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We hear a similar passion with a lot of other guests we've had on the show about the drive to make an impact, to make a difference, and the ability to creatively do that in the built environment has been a very common draw. So that's a good through line that we see in this conversation. But one thing we also hear from our guests is that we hear a lot about the field of architecture is so broad that people tend to find their niche, right? Mine is school design. That's what I love to do. Adeze Kadeh talked about how she found her niche in hospitality design and the big resorts. I remember Angela Lee found it in healthcare, and particularly some of the international projects. Do you have a similar niche somewhere that you landed?
I think from architecture typology, right, I haven't really specialized in one particular field. I have done several types of projects, and I definitely enjoy some more than others. Aviation, I've done retail, I've done office buildings, I've done casinos, I've done home. So, hotels, and so I consider myself a generalist from that standpoint. However, from a niche standpoint, I would say the common thread across all the projects that I work on and have worked on in the past is this high performance factor to them, right? Trying to create a building, regardless of what it is, that has as light of a footprint on this planet as possible, that have energy savings, a healthy environment, right? So really hitting that high performance across the board on multiple topics. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense because we've seen that grow in the field of architecture over the past almost generation, even, where LEED got introduced and kind of gave us a framework for talking about energy. And we've seen very recently the well building standard talking about health and how that's impacted how we talk about conversations of the built environment. Um, and so you've sort of found a role specifically in implementing high performance, which is a bit of a broad term, but high performance in a broad array of projects. So that's interesting. But let's talk about high performance specifically. How do you determine what high performance means on any given project, and what can that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because I think when people think of high performance, you immediately think of energy, and obviously that is a huge piece of it. But performance really happens in a lot of different areas, right? It could be how the building engages the community, right? Some do it better than others, right? In a high performance way. It could be in the way the building actually efficiently manages the people inside, right? Circulation can be efficient or not efficient, right? So there's a multiple sort of uh, layers, right, that you can start to think about high performance, not just energy. Obviously, that's kind of where you begin, because that does start to inform a lot about the building itself.
Okay. So I hear you talking, it's more than just energy efficiency, which we talk about a lot in architecture. There's the big push for initiatives like the 2020 challenge or 2030 challenge um, and reducing carbon emissions, which the built environment has a large impact on, don't get me wrong. But you're saying that they can be more than just energy savings.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a specific project maybe you've worked on recently that celebrated that?
Yeah, of course. So most recently, we just completed construction documents for an airport concourse addition. It's 7 airplane gates we added to, or we're planning to add to Grand Rapids, Michigan International Airport. And that particular project, one of the first things we did from the beginning, obviously talk to the client, understand what their needs were. But it's really when we started the design process, start with an energy model to establish a baseline. And then also start to understand how the circulation works, what their, what the client was struggling. So we started to weave in, right, the functional needs with the building sort of orientation, looking at, this building faces east and west. So we have a lot of sun in the east and a lot of sun in the west in the early morning and the late evening. We needed to mitigate that, but obviously we wanted to create a healthy environment. So looking at that energy model, daylight studies, to really understand how can we take advantage of the good and mitigate the bad.
Yeah. Yeah, because the minute you tell me that you have a large face on the east and west of the building, I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking energy savings, and I'm thinking I'm sitting in that airport terminal at about 5, 6 o'clock at night, and I can't read a book because the sun is hitting me in the eyeballs. I'm just cranky and waiting on my flight, pissed off that I can't find a charger. So, I can totally see how one challenge on one project creates a multiple series of avenues to look at how to address that problem and create that high performance that you're talking about, both from an energy perspective and from an experience perspective,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I mean, one of the other things I'll just quickly add is, just the mechanical systems, right? Keeping people comfortable, right? It's a cold climate, and looking at radiant heat and some of the efficient systems that, again, talk about the building energy savings, but people's comfort, right? So it's again, that performance piece.
Absolutely. And as an architect, we think about building masses, but we also have to work with our consultants to bring their perspective of the heating equipment and the systems in place. Good point to bring up for some of our audience who might be interested in getting involved in that role. Now, we're a little ahead of schedule, so if somebody wants to submit questions in the chat thread, please do so. We'd love to entertain any questions from the audience, especially here on our final episode. So now the final question that I typically ask has a little bit different focus. I'm going to tweak it for this last conversation, and specifically because of your performance on, or your focus on performance of buildings. So I don't know how long your career has been. It sounds like you've been around long enough to see some real change in the focus of the industry as we've developed this consciousness around performance of buildings. And so I wonder how the industry is going to change in 10 to 15 years, and specifically what kind of people or how people should prepare to be architects in a world 10, 15 years from now, when perhaps this focus is even more important than ever.
I think architecture is definitely becoming a much more social, impactful profession. It's not just about buildings, right? It's really about people. Ultimately, that's who we serve and what we design to, right? The people that occupy these structures. And so I would say in the 10, 15 years that are coming up, myself included, right? I think we all need to be a little bit more aware of what's happening culturally, socially, to really understand the needs of the occupants, really provide flexibility into our designs. A lot of the buildings change over time. And when we're starting to think about these high performance or, just light footprint on the planet, right? Create structures that can adapt to change. From personal point of view, I would say, curiosity, stay curious, stay inquisitive. The more you can learn, the better, teacher you're going to be. One last thing, I had read one time, it takes 3 really to become a good architect. And those 3 things are, you have to be a good listener, you have to be a good speaker, and you have to have a good sense of design. And I would say those things have to be fully sort of balanced, right? You can't have who's just an awesome designer but cannot listen to the client. That's just not going to work. So design's really a third of the profession, right? The other 60% is really listening to the people that you're designing to and talking, right, to your colleagues, to your teammates, to your client, to the occupants.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, and I get where you're coming from. We host meetings at the beginnings of all of our jobs for education, trying to really get into the meat of what a particular client needs. And it's amazing how different even something as what you would think would be predictable, like a school building, can really look when you get into the nuances of what's a particular district or a particular teacher even is trying to do in the classroom. So I can totally see that. The need to listen, the need to communicate well, it's a very pivotal skill set for an architect. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Sure.
But I want to follow up on that actually, because you talk about the need to listen and the kind of surprising creative results that can come out of that. What's the most unusual thing you've heard or the most unusual results you've had to work with for a project where you had to listen and really figure out what's going on with the project?
So one definitely stands out. A client that came in and he said, he wanted a brewery expansion done, designed for him. And we said, sure, do you have anything in mind or anything specific in mind? And he said, yes, I'd like to have, the concept of Mad Max, and Frank Lloyd Wright and Game of Thrones. And they say, and I want it to be a castle. And that was probably one of the most unusual things I've ever heard. And he asked, can you guys do that? And we said, of course, no problem.
Mad Max, Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road, Frank Lloyd Wright, a castle, and a brewery expansion smashed together. And you made that work?
That's right. Game of Thrones, Mad Max, and Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh my gosh. Ladies and gentlemen, the profession of architecture, you will never be bored.
Piece of cake.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story to end on. Thank you, Jorge.
You're welcome.
And thank everyone for joining us. This has been an absolute pleasure hosting this series. Hopefully this conversation encourages you to be curious about architecture and how we're constantly trying to shape the world around us for the better, high performance and socially aware design. And maybe you're interested in the architecture side of that, or maybe you're interested in one of the supporting roles that we've talked about through this process. We're always in need of good human resources and researchers and technology people to make this profession possible. And it's only more important as we go forward to have people who are allies in the creative side of the profession. And so we're very proud of all the people we've been able to celebrate and the people we haven't, because there's just too many in the firm to really talk to all at once. This could go on forever, but we had to cut it somewhere, and this is where we decided to, because students are coming back to school, and we'll give them a complete series to work with. Now, remember, as always, this video will go live on our story and Instagram TV, and you can share that with family and friends that you think need to know about this. If you have follow-up questions, you can comment there, and we'll do our best to get back to you. We appreciate everybody's time and attention, and to all of our guests, especially Jorge for this last one. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks again.